I thought that today we would have the conversation that everyone is having. Before we talk a little bit about AI lately.
Lovely.
If we don't talk about AI, I'll even talk here.
Not a conversation.
I don't worry about all. Hi, my name is Luis. I am head of product design at YLD. YLD is a digital tech design consultancy based in London and in Lisbon, Porto. And I am here today with James. Hello, James. Happy to have you here.
Thank you. Happy to be here.
So James is one of our senior product designers focusing mainly on UI.
Mm-hmm. So I guess there are two different topics that come up quite a lot, which are how has AI impacted how we work in terms of the actual design process and how we incorporate AI into that process.
Absolutely.
And the other angle is what is it like to design for AI? So tools or products that actually incorporate AI, how does that actually impact our design process and the considerations that we have to make?
Excellent. Let's go. Maybe let's start with using AI for creating stuff. There is an element of automation, but definitely. Like personally, I'm a supporter of designers using AI as a part of their work process or part of creating stuff. I think the important thing is about understanding when and how to trust AI outputs. I think there's a lot of things like Figma obviously has a lot of AI integrations that you can use. I don't think there's a tool today that doesn't have some form of AI. But I would still expect, I would say that the design team, I would still expect them to kind of have ownership of context, of outputs, of the creative parts, and not sort of relying on AI. So there's a level of relying on AI to do the work for you, but don't necessarily to do your work. If that makes sense. So I think absolutely use AI.
Yeah.
But the designer is still responsible for the outputs.
Absolutely. So a bit like what we were saying about you've gone through a discovery, you've gathered all these insights. I, as a designer, should know all of the nuance. I should understand each of these. Yeah. But I might use AI to actually just spit this out into something that I can easily relate to a client. Yeah. But when I'm questioned, I still know all of that information. It's not enough to fully trust AI into all the nuance or context that might be.
And also, if you take something like user interviews, for example.
That's one thing.
How many hours have I not spent first conducting those interviews and then going back, rewatching them, taking notes, like trying to get the transcript and then sort of synthesizing all that information into something tangible.
Yeah.
Like today, the AI will take your notes for you and it will summarize it for you. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't go over them to double check them, but it does save you an awful lot of time that you can then spend on the creative process of putting together tangible outcomes.
Yeah.
We had somebody in our team that was kind of looking at using AI for creating imagery and illustrations. There is a room for that when maybe you're creating stuff that is not your final output. But what I would want to not see yet, at least, is the AI doing the heavy visual design illustration output.
Yeah.
I was quite... I have never been a massive fan of Doctorlink because I do think it's a very true representative of our copy.
Yeah,
completely there. And I think AI there does a great job of, we creating this, whatever tool it is for fintech, and I need some copy that is somewhat relevant to the fintech. So whoever stakeholders looking at that doesn't sort of, and it gives a better understanding of how much space something is going to take. And I think in scenarios like that, I think AI is fantastic. But if you're going to be a content designer and helping to action the content that ends up online or ends up on the released product, designers are still, and there should be, responsible for the final outputs.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think it's something that I use maybe for that. Okay, if you take like the illustration example, I maybe need like I need help with like the composition.
Yeah.
Like it's not going to do the illustration, but just something that I would say like, oh, what if we did this? What if we did this? And I don't want to necessarily go and go fully commit to an idea. It's just sort of stress testing. Yeah, exactly. It's just stress testing. Oh, it could be something like this, or I could take this element and as you say, it's sort of just giving me a push in the direction that I want to go, maybe, or just testing an idea.
Maybe it's useful in documentation and design.
Well, thank God, yeah. I mean, yeah, I think there's a lot of busy work as a designer that we've had to do. And you mentioned things about like lorem ipsum. It's like before that, you would have to kind of sit down and think, because we don't use lorem ipsum. I've been taught out by you. You actually have to sit down and think, where's some good copy for this page? Like, I'm just going to sit here and try and think of some. Do you know what it is? It's like, that's mine. I think there is a lot of that busy work is really invaluable, and that is, I mean, design systems are another kettle of fish, but yeah, the level of kind of documentation, of copy, of things like that, where it's part of what we're doing, but it can be very time consuming to actually do it by hand, or just that's invaluable.
And I think you said to us before. Yeah, it's a great example of just like, well, actually, just meetings in general, like not having to spend all of that time synthesizing, like making sure you're taking notes, and also like even when you're on a call, like this probably, I'm giving way too much here, but I feel a bit like when I'm on a call and I can focus on the conversation and I don't have to worry so much about making sure that I get every single note. Like I still take notes of things that someone says, which is really key thing that's important.
Yeah.
But I used to try to almost like verbatim to write down what someone was saying, and sort of like, and it's difficult to do that and at the same time listen to the conversation. But it's a better one.
I mean, we used to do it when we did user interviews. You would have one person conducting the interview and one person saying,
for exactly
for that reason.
So one person would literally be the person who had to take down every single thing that was said.
Yeah.
But there is good and bad. But I would say like full supporter of using AI for the process and for the work, just as long as the designers are still responsible for what actually comes out of it.
Yeah.
I would say that designing for AI is probably something that is less about making things look pretty or behave in a certain way. Maybe that, well, at least kind of the visual, but kind of the UI stuff all ends. I think it's more about getting someone to understand that this is AI, get them to trust the tooling, understanding why AI is implemented here and how it functions and what is the heavy lifting that the AI is doing.
Yeah.
And also, how do you, if it doesn't have a response, like how do you, like you need a different level of almost error messaging. How do I know that it's doing something? Is nothing happening? Like there is a lot of things that you need to think about. Is trust, right? It comes down to being able to trust, and that trust is also about kind of what is the information that AI is being fed. I think there is a lot of, we all know this, there's a lot of bias risks. There's a lot like leaning towards, especially when you look at, I mean, if you take like imagery, for example, if you ask AI to create, for example, personas, and you need, I don't know, like a person in charge from a CEO or whatever it is, so if you need a marketing person or HR person, AI has a tendency to go in one direction, or for a certain type of persona, or in another direction for different type of persona.
Yeah.
And actually, I remember when we were doing personas ourselves, one of the things that we were often talking about is to basically make sure that we don't make that mistake. So I would look at the designers' personas, and they might have been very well constructed, but there is a certain level of like, why do everyone look exactly the same? Like, and why do we not have, and I think that's the one thing that we need to be careful when it comes to AI as well. Like, and we're creating tools that incorporate AI that the outcome of those AI are not like biased towards one or the other direction. So I think that's one thing. I think there are also new like voice, like tone of voice, this probably becomes very important as well. There is I mean, I was saying human earlier, but I do think that as humans, we have a tendency to put personality onto things. And I think that's just human nature. So even when people talk into chatbots, there is an element of like
Conversation.
yeah, like in a conversation, and it's actually the better the AI is getting, the more natural and human it seems. So then we sort of start putting human personalities on as voice expectation that people have on the playback from that chatbot. So again, like, do we know that it's AI? Do we tell people like, well, how do we signpost that properly? And so there is a kind of a different way or a different level of things that become, what's the word I'm looking for? A different set of design considerations that become really important.
Yeah, I would agree. It feels a lot more kind of fluid. I think that's how I would probably describe it. I mean, if you think of like the user flow with AI, you kind of almost have another character that you're introducing, like you have the user, but then you have the kind of AI is the man machine. Yeah, so it's kind of like you're trying to then sort of split almost the flows or journeys in your head. And I think it's another example of what we were talking about earlier about getting engineering involved at the start, because here,
absolutely,
they will have so many good insights that are not considered from a technical perspective. And you mentioned it there about like trust. One of the other things that's quite interesting is like the patterns that we associate with AI are also kind of quite new.
Yeah.
And I think that's quite an interesting thing of, it's still kind of, a lot of things are still up for grabs in terms of the UX behind AI and the UI behind AI. And I think that's a really interesting thing about how you go about communicating that AI is present and what does that look like and how do you interact with it. And there are patterns emerging, but it's still quite open, and it can be obviously because AI can be quite specific in how it's implemented. It might vary quite a lot depending on the project.
Absolutely. And I think there is you said about new patterns, I think like, so I was using a quite famous learning, Duolingo. And I think what they've done, which I think the idea is really great. So they have this new thing now. Well, I say new, maybe it's been around for a while, but I've only discovered it fairly recently and given it a go. And it's basically that you can call somebody and talk to them. So they have this, which is obviously an AI that you're talking to. And there are sort of like a little bit of delay, obviously, because the machine is ultimately trying to hear what you're saying. Exactly, putting something together that makes sense. And I think it's super interesting. Like, that's a really good use of it, because I think one of the things that often being criticized when you're learning a language is that you don't speak enough. And then obviously now there are loads of new language apps that are all based on AI conversation. And you're supposed to speak to it. Whatever language is you're trying to learn. And I think that's really interesting. So then that opens a whole new, as you say, like a new set of interactions, new sets of UI or UX. So that's super exciting. I think there are, I'm a big Spotify fan, and I think that the Spotify AI always impresses me, or the algorithm in the scenario always impresses me how well it does. But I also think like that little sort of, you are getting this recommended because of this. It's sort of like a signposting that there is a reason why something happened, and it might not seem like a lot, but I think those small things really, it makes it a lot easier to take on board, to accept.
I feel it's less
intrusive.
Again, going back to what we're talking about, being transparent.
Absolutely. Transparency, trust. I think what you said was super. Actually, it's a really good thing that I'm going to think more about when you say you're sort of almost introducing a
second character,
another character. There's you as the user, the human, And then you have the tool itself, which is kind of being considered a machine in a way. But now you also have the AI, which is really, it's like, well, the machine or the robot or whatever it is. So you're kind of introducing, as you said, like, as a third character into the equation. Very interesting way of looking at it. So yeah. So I know for a fact that you have done both obviously, but you have done some work for AI tools.
Yeah.
Well, apart from what we just have been talking about, what have been some kind of discoveries, even for you, like as the senior person who's been in the industry for a while, what has been interesting that's going to be so challenging?
You said at the start that UI is kind of my main focus. I think, and I mentioned it there about the different patterns. I think that is kind of a bit of it's kind of like learning something a bit new. I mean, you obviously know the patterns because you use AI in tools, as we were saying, like every tool has AI. But yeah, I think as a product designer, or particularly UI designer, you kind of know the patterns, right? You know the best approach to a solution. But I think with AI, it's a lot more fresh. It's a lot more, oh, actually, is this super clear? Like there's a really good article I read the other day about the kind of visual language of AI and that idea that like it's kind of become industry standard that you use purple and that you use sparkles and like these types of things are really interesting because I think it's so interesting, the idea of this is also something that has to be communicated to a user who might not be technical. I think because we are sort of at the cutting edge, if you like, reality, because it's something that's so ubiquitous in how we work, but also in the tools that we work. The idea of trying to communicate it in a tool where somebody might actually, I have friends that have non-technical jobs, and they know a very superficial understanding of AI. It's not as ubiquitous. I think you can get sort of caught in a bit of a rabbit hole almost with it.
Yeah.
So I think the idea, obviously, trying to represent it in a way that isn't intrusive, that is helpful, that is clear what it is, what it can do, what it is trying to do. That's been really interesting. As I said before about that kind of fluidity of it, it's a lot of the time when you're kind of designing a product or a tool, it's much more kind of straightforward. It's yes or no, forwards or backwards a lot of the time to some degree. With AI, you're kind of, that whole generative approach obviously throws a bit more of a curveball into the mix when what you have to cover and the different edge cases. And yeah, I think that it just increases the scope and breadth of what you need to design and what you need to consider. Because obviously, as a user, you can now do so much more within a given tool.
Yeah. And I think what you said as well is like, as product designers or as people working in tech industry, even if everyone is not necessarily at the cutting edge, we're all in it. We all do it on a daily basis. We're all very familiar with it. But majority of people in society who are the people who use the tools that we create, they know. Like not at all. And I think it's very important that everybody remembers that. And that's not just for AI, that's just for general. Like most people are not up to date on what's happening in the tech industry. And like I think it's becoming more common today to know about it because tech is a lot more publicly known and it appears a lot more than it used to. But we do live in a bubble.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that most people are not in that bubble. So for us, when we say, and like, this is clearly AI. Like, I mean, if you look online on social media, the amount of things that are created which are clearly AI, and when you go to comment section, what is it? Only this is amazing, man. Oh my god! And then one of the most ironic questions is this real?
Yeah, scary.
And so there's a huge majority of people out there
whose literacy is it wipes the bay.
I'll say I just say like they might be aware that this exists. They just haven't really got to a point yet where they fully understand the capabilities or the presence or what it can do.
Yeah.
And I think that's important to remember when you're designing. So that you've got to assume that the person on the other side of the screen or more of the touch point just not have the same conversation too.
Yeah, exactly.
So I think that's really important. And I would also say as a final note on AI, that kind of like, are we going to take our jobs? Like, I don't think that AI is going to take our jobs. I think that it's a great support, it's a great tool, and it will become smarter for sure. Because he's already smarter now than he was just voicing out like 2 years ago, or a year ago, last week. It's just like, he's so quick. But we also need to become smarter on how we use it. We need to be familiar and very comfortable with using it.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we are, I think it's a supporting act rather than the main act.
Yeah.
Because for me, I want my designers to still be the main act.
I think as well, as a designer, it's inherently kind of people interaction based job. And I think it's easy to look past that and not see that as being the case. But I do think that like it is about nuance and context and relationship that that's still where the actual value is. I think it's easy to think, AI is going to be able to just produce my UI designs and I'm going to be out of a job or whatever. But actually, I think that there's a large chunk of it which is about, okay, I need to understand the relationships between these two departments or with stakeholders or whatever. That is much more kind of human level.
Absolutely.
Which don't think is there yet.
Not just that. Okay.
No more questions.
No more for you. I don't have anything else for you either. So thank you so much. I know you're very busy, so I appreciate you taking the time to have a chat with me.
It's been lovely.
Yeah, it's been really nice. Really appreciate that. And if anybody has any questions about what we do at YLD or need support with any of the stuff that we have been talking about, then please don't be shy. Hit us up and reach out, and we'll see what we can do to help.
Lovely.
Lovely. Thank you.
Thank you very much.